Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Gideon Levy's The Punishment of Gaza. Now, this is not a traditional book in the sense of it's not a narrative from front to back. It's a collection of articles that Levy wrote between 2006 and 2009. He is to this day a journalist for Haaretz. In fact, he's a very well-known journalist. In 2021, he won the Sokolov Award, which is the highest, most prestigious award you can win for Israeli journalism. So I expect, as usual, people to shoot the messenger, call him self-hating, anti-Semite, even though he's an Israeli, even though he's won awards for Israeli journalism. But he provides a voice for Palestinians by his reporting, and he's been very well known for that. Now, part of the challenge of reading these columns is he is writing for Haaretz readers. So the idea is that you probably, if you're reading Haaretz on a weekly basis, daily basis, you probably have a very good grasp of the political landscape, the differences between Kadima, Likud, Labor, and the ins and outs of politics, the briefings from foreign ministers, from the IDF, etc. So if you don't know that, which I'm a person who doesn't know that, you're going to miss quite a bit from what he's referring to. He's going to make references to things that you have to go look up, which I had to go look up numerous times. But if you were an Israeli reading Haaretz on a daily basis, you would know a lot of the references that he made because you're probably that sort of reader. That shouldn't discourage you from reading it. First of all, you can see it's not very long. It's maybe about 120 pages. But what these articles provide you with is a number of ways that you can dig deeper into what has happened to Gaza, into the way that Israeli politics is being formed, is heading, and part of why it's been a slow movement to the right, to where we see it today. And this is 2024 now. What does an attack on Gaza look like in 2024? There's a lot less remorse and pity. There was even less pity and remorse in this 2006 to 2009 period. But at that time, I could say that Israeli politics were somewhere in the closer to the center. But now it's much more oriented to the right. Anyway, that's all to say, please don't get discouraged if you don't know a lot about what's going on in day-to-day Israeli politics, because what he's talking about here will help you understand where to research and what to look for. So I'm going to take certain quotes from different parts of these articles in order to help you maybe take a look at and go deeper with some of these things. And one of the themes that is helpful, which I've talked about with people, is the reason why apartheid South Africa eventually fell. It wasn't because the people running the apartheid government suddenly lost their convictions and no longer believed in the rightness of apartheid. It was because their situation was morally and economically untenable. There was no future for them. The boycott was too large. The political, let's say, edging out was too significant. The boycotts they had, both for business and government, and there was no future for them. And so they realized they had to give up. The problem is that Israel faces no such moral or economic opprobrium, because remember, criticism of Israel in any way makes you an anti-Semite. It is not permissible to criticize Israel, ever. Remember that. Israel is always correct. Israel is always moral. And that's the issue here that Levy is making, is that the Israelis can't possibly change insofar as they are never given an opportunity to look inside and self-criticize. And he makes this point in a couple places. The first, if each group in its field, and perhaps this will someday also include tourism officials, business people, artists, and athletes, all boycott Israel, perhaps Israelis will begin to understand, albeit the hard way, that there is a price to pay for the occupation, a price they pay with their pockets and with their status. And this was an attitude that people talked about many years ago. I think some people who've written about this talk that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the idea was, well, we're going to have to come to some kind of settlement because the world is not going to let us get away with this. And alas, the world has. He adds, the Israelis don't pay any price for the injustice of the occupation, so the occupation will never end. It will not end a moment before the Israelis understand the connection between the occupation and the price they will be forced to pay. They will never shake it off on their own initiative, and why should they? So as as long as there is no connection between, well, why is this happening and how it happened in the first place? How did we get to this place? How was there an occupation in the first place? What are all of those peoples doing in Gaza? A denial about what happened in 1948. And Levy notes that again, people wanted to jump on Ilan Pape's case when I said that. Levy says, let us forget for a moment the 416 villages Israel wiped off the face of the earth in 1948. Conspiracy theorist? The 2021 Sokolov Award, highest award for Israeli journalism. Is he also a conspiracy theorist like Ilan Pape? People don't like to hear the reality of what happened at the Nakba, but it happened, and too many people know about it now. The internet's too available for people to just believe whatever the IDF tells us anymore. So remember, I said that Israel can't be condemned. They can't even be condemned by a fellow Israeli. So here he gives a story. The day after Rosh Hashanah, we traveled to Rafah. Dam Hamad, 14, had been killed in her sleep in her mother's arms by an Israeli rocket strike that sent a concrete pillar crashing down on her head. She was the only daughter of her paralyzed mother, her whole world. In the family's impoverished home in the Brazil neighborhood at the edge of Rafah, we met the mother, who lay in a heap in bed. Everything she had in the world was gone. Outside, I remarked to the French television reporter who accompanied me that this was one of those moments I felt ashamed to be an Israeli. The next day, he called and said, they didn't broadcast what you said for fear of the Jewish viewers in France. He is not even allowed to express remorse for a child being killed because, once again, Israel cannot be condemned because if you condemn Israel, you are an anti-Semite. Which, again, is a ridiculous idea. He points out something else that I think we don't think about. This may be the only war in history against a strip of land enclosed by a fence. I mean, what an image that this is the dangerous part of the world, an open air prison where people are enclosed by a fence. That's the place that needs to be attacked, not even a state. So, as I said, part of the Israel is never wrong. It's not just never wrong to the world. It's not even wrong internally speaking. When journalists bring up criticism, they are also breaking the rules. So you're talking about the Gazans. They are also, quote, breaking the rules laid down by Israel. We are allowed to bomb anything we want, and they are not allowed to launch Qassams. When they fire a Qassam is one of these homemade rockets. And they are not allowed to launch Qassams. When they fire a Qassam at Ashkelon, that's an escalation of the conflict. But when we bomb a university and a school, it's perfectly all right. Why? Because they started it. That's why the majority thinks that all the justice is on our side. Like in a schoolyard fight, Israel's assurance that they started it is the winning moral argument to justify every injustice. So, who really did start it? And has Israel, quote, left Gaza? Great questions. Great questions. I'm sure there are Haaretz readers that actually listen, but I think the rest will just call him. I think in 2014, someone in the Likud had called for him to be arrested for treason. It's arrested for treason because he dares to criticize Israel as an Israeli. When we say that someone is a friend of Israel, we mean a friend of the occupation, a believer in Israel's self-armament, a champion of its language of strength, and a supporter of all its regional delusions. When we say someone is a friend of Israel, we mean someone who will give Israel carte blanche for any violent adventure it desires, for rejecting peace, and for building in the territories. Cry the beloved country, that is not my patriotism, which is nevertheless supreme patriotism. In fact, the furious responses to every scrap of criticism give rise to the suspicion that perhaps some Israelis know deep within their desensitized hearts that something terrible is burning beneath their feet, that a vast conflagration is threatening to burst through the thick, stupefying, contorting, and obfuscating fog that covers them. Maybe we are not as right as everyone promises us morning and night. Maybe something horrific is happening in front of our wide-shut eyes. If Israelis were so sure of the rightness of their cause, why the violent intolerance they display toward everyone who tries to make a different case? Excellent point. One can say that Hamas hides among the civilian population as if the defense ministry in Tel Aviv is not located in the heart of a civilian population, as if there are places in Gaza that are not in the heart of a civilian population. One can also claim that Hamas uses children as human shields, as if in the past our own organizations fighting to establish a country did not recruit children. Do they not know that disproportionately harming a civilian population, supply convoys, and medical crews, the use of white phosphorus in the midst of population centers, and indiscriminate bombings are considered war crimes? For those of you who don't know what white phosphorus is, when it's used against civilian populations, it's effectively a chemical weapons attack. White phosphorus, you can say you're using it to provide cover for a military attack, but it often causes fires to start wherever it's in a large concentration, and people who are exposed to it get severe burns. And Israel uses white phosphorus all the time in the midst of civilian populations. And it's okay to condemn other people for the alleged use of chemical weapons, but no, Israel once again cannot be criticized because what repeat after me, criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. I want to talk about some of the murders of children that Levy highlights. I just chose some because it's too depressing to read them all, but I wanted to give you all some sense of the scope of this. IDF troops killed children in the West Bank too. Jamil Jabaji, a 14-year-old boy who tended horses in the new Askar refugee camp, was shot in the head and killed last December. He and his friends were throwing rocks at the armored vehicle that passed by the camp, located near Nablus. The driver provoked the children, slowing down and speeding up, until finally a soldier got out, aimed his gun at the boy's head, and fired. Jamil's horses were left in their stable, and his family was left to mourn. Bushra Barghese hadn't even left her home. In late April, she was studying for a big test, notebooks in hand, pacing around her room in the Jenin refugee camp in the early evening, when a sniper shot her in the forehead from quite far away. Her blood-stained notebooks bear witness to her final moments. God does not show mercy to the children at Gaza's nursery school, and neither does the Israeli Defense Forces. That's how it goes when war is waged in such a densely packed area with a population so blessed with children. About half of Gaza's residents are under 15. No pilot or soldier goes to war to kill children. Not one intends to kill children. But it also seems that in this war, neither did they intend not to kill children. Israel's pilots and soldiers went to war after the IDF had already killed 952 Palestinian children and adolescents since May 2000. A significant majority of the children killed in Gaza did not die because they were used as human shields or because they worked for Hamas. They were killed because the IDF bombed, shelled, or fired at them, their families, or their apartment buildings. This is why the blood of Gaza's children is on our hands, not on Hamas's hands, and we will never be able to escape that responsibility. So, we're not talking only about children. What happens if you're just someone who's going about your day and trying to do work? Uh, After all, they could always claim he tried to steal their weapons. They're talking about someone who they had arrested. Never mind that he was bound with plastic handcuffs that were practically impossible to get out of. A bullet in the stomach from close range ended the life of Yassir Temezi, 35, who had a work permit and had held jobs in Israel for all of his adult life. In the past year, he had worked for the Harash company in Ashdod. He was a young father who'd never gotten into any trouble with the IDF before. The soldiers arrested him for no reason, beat him for no reason in front of one of his small children, and finally executed him for no reason. The story, frankly, is too difficult to read, and I would just tell you to get the book so you can read it yourself. The idea is, remember that the Gazans are supposed to do nothing. They're just supposed to allow themselves to get attacked. If you want to get this idea of mowing the lawn, this is the way that some of the generals in the IDF refer to what has to go on in Gaza. They have to go in, mow the lawn occasionally, kill a bunch of people. If the Gazans were sitting quietly as Israel expects them to do, their case would disappear from the agenda, here and around the world. Israel would continue with the convergence, which is solely meant to serve our goals, ignoring their needs. Nobody would have given any thought to the fate of the people of Gaza if they had not behaved violently. That is a very bitter truth, but the first 20 years of the occupation passed quietly, and we did not lift a finger to end it. Instead, under cover of the quiet, we built the enormous criminal settlement enterprise. With our own hands, we are now once again pushing the Palestinians into using what petty arms they have, and in response we employ nearly the entire enormous arsenal at our disposal and continue to complain that they started it. The theory everybody already knew to be false, that the political choice of a people could be changed through violence, that the Gazans could be made into Zionists by being abused, was put into practice anyway. Now we finally have to change course to do what nobody has tried before, if only because we have no other choice. And I have to give credit to Levy there. He continues to have hope, as do I, despite what he's seen. And he's seen far more than I will ever see in my lifetime. People, quote, in shock exist only in Israel. No one has gone into shock in Gaza. Children of the South live only in Stroh. Hamas fighters are terrorists, and Hamas activists, too, are not entitled to the honorific title of non-combatants, so their fate is the same. Every postman of the Palestinian Postal Service, every policeman, every government accountant, and maybe also every doctor working in Hamas's non-civil administration is considered an activist of the organization, and therefore is to be killed before he kills us. This is a response that he wrote. An open letter was sent to Haaretz, and he's responding to this open letter to this. I think he's an author. A.B. Yehoshua. You are judging a helpless people denied a government and army, which includes a fundamentalist movement, using improper means to fight for a just cause, namely the end of the occupation. In the same way you judge a regional power, which considers itself humanitarian and democratic, but which has shown itself to be a brutal and cruel conqueror. As an Israeli, I cannot admonish their leaders while our hands are covered in blood, nor do I wish to judge Israel and the Palestinians in the same way you have. Part of Levy's anguish, I believe, is his knowledge that Israelis in this push against the Gazans in insisting that they are nothing but animals that need to be crushed, and I would say even animals deserve better treatment than what the Gazans are given, is this notion that the souls and the hearts and the well-being of the Israelis are being destroyed from within because of how this attitude they take towards their fellow human. To do this without any unnecessary moral qualms, we have trained our soldiers to think that the lives and property of Palestinians have no value whatsoever. It is part of a process of dehumanization that has endured for dozens of years, the fruits of the occupation. He sums up, so this was one of the articles he wrote in 2009, so this is towards the end of the book, and towards the end of this period of violence. It was all in vain, no progress made, no goal achieved, nothing. Deterrence was not reestablished, arms smuggling into Gaza was not stopped, Hamas was not weakened, and abducted Israel Defense Forces soldier Gilad Shalit was not freed. On these facts we all agree. Moreover, we paid a huge price. Hamas is stronger. The injured Palestinian people are even more hateful towards us. Israel is viewed as a pariah in global public opinion, with rioting on a basketball court in Ankara, where an Israeli team played, and the banning of spectators from Israel's Davis Cup tennis encounter with Sweden in Malmö. We are the last of the rogue states. And despite all of this, a man who had his family bombed. He was a civilian. They were having dinner, and a bomb that was supposed to hit a Hamas leader instead hit this apartment, hit this family, killed almost all of them. And here's the man as he's responding. They always said the helicopters were the smartest weapons. Suddenly it's the dumbest weapon, says Mohammed, bleary-eyed. It's happened to other families too. I don't know when it will stop. If it keeps on like this, I don't know how it will end. Who can put a stop to it? Only the two peoples. They're the ones with the pain and the suffering, not the governments or the leaders. Only the peoples can put an end to this business. The Israelis and the Palestinians. Olmert's son doesn't serve in the army, and Hania's son doesn't go around with a rifle opposing the occupation. I think that's very heartening. If someone who has just been speaking in the grief of having his family murdered for no reason can say there's still a chance for peace, but the peoples have to reach for it. That's what I'm going to continue to believe and lead with as I continue in this year, reading these books about the crisis, reading these books about the conflict between these peoples. I too hope for peace, not because I'm an Israeli or a Palestinian, but because I believe that it's something that has to be resolved and it should be resolved, but it can only happen when both sides are ready to do it. And I think Levy does an excellent job of trying to wake up the Israelis as an Israeli to their moral culpability for what has happened and to the reality that Palestinians are people. They are not just animals. They have been occupied, they have been kicked out of their homes, and there deserves to be an end to this other than continued ethnic cleansing, which I think Netanyahu has recently alluded to, that he just basically wants to push all these people out into the Sinai and take Gaza and pretend all these people don't exist. So, on that note, if you'd like to get this book, there'll be a link to buy it below. If you'd like to support this work, please hit like, hit subscribe. You can send a super thanks if you'd like. Some of you have done that before. Thank you very much. If you'd like to support my work by becoming a member of Patreon or by becoming a YouTube member, that's even better. You'll get early access to some of this work. You'll be able to suggest books more in a more rapid way. I've got a huge list of books to get through, but potentially members will have the opportunity to push those books to the top of the list. There's also my Amazon wish list. There are other books on other conflicts if you'd like to push them up. I think this is just something that we'll continue to talk about a lot in 2024. And thank you for taking the time to hear some of these very difficult words from Gideon Levy. But I think that those of you who take the time to dig deeper into this will be rewarded with a deeper knowledge of what's really going on, much, much more than the media is going to tell you. And this is from the pen of an Israeli who lived it, who traveled to Gaza many, many times to do the reporting, and can tell you stories that you wouldn't possibly hear otherwise. Please check it out, and until next time, enjoy your reading.